Russia has always been a hard place to preach the gospel. The culture is skeptical, the government is restrictive, and ever since the war in Ukraine, pressure on churches and missionaries has only increased. But in the middle of all of that, Adam Young has stayed. He planted a church, he discipled men, he preached the gospel, and carefully and courageously reached people for Jesus Christ. When the Ukraine conflict tightened laws and intensified scrutiny, many people and missionaries were either folded or fled. But Adam has not. He found ways to keep the mission alive, to keep people growing in Scripture, and to keep the light burning in a place many consider spiritually dead. Today, he sits down with us to share what ministry in Russia is really like, the pressure, the risk, the breakthroughs, and the moments that only God could orchestrate. This is a story of a husband, a father, a church planner, and a man who learned to follow Christ in one of the world's hardest mission fields. So this is Adam Young. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, really appreciate you giving the time. And we just want to dive in just to your early life and how you eventually came to a knowledge of Jesus Christ and just where you grew up and where you went to school.
Well, I grew up in Roanoke Park, California. That's right next to Santa Rosa. It's in the North Bay, about 45 minutes above San Francisco if there's no traffic. And when I graduated from high school, I played football in high school, and then I went and I played football at the University of California, Davis. While I was there, I took the Russian language because they made you. In other words, to get a liberal arts degree there, you had to take 1 year of a foreign language. And there's lots of great languages out there that you could take or whatever, but the Soviet Union had just collapsed in 1991. And so I wasn't saved. But so a lot of my concerns, or a lot of my my decision process was like what would be kind of financially beneficial, and so I wasn't that kind of interested in Russia at the beginning or whatever, but just thought that what I know about it, in World War II when Germany and Japan lost, they had a great time of rebuilding, and it was one of the times when the economies grow fastest is after they've, kind of completely shut down and then they start up again. There's a lot of opportunity there. And both Japan and Germany by then were, world leaders in GDP and so on and so forth, having come from a place where, all of their towns were like firebombed and so on and so forth. So anyways, I thought the same thing would happen after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And I was fairly right about that. The economy in Russia grew. It took a little while. There's a ton of corruption in Russia, much more. Every country has some, but a lot more than the other two countries I just mentioned. But still, they grew at a really fast rate. And by the time I got there, really it was pretty expensive to live there. Actually, Moscow for the 2000s was one of the most expensive places to live in the world. So more expensive than Tokyo, New York, or any of those places you often think of. So anyways, so I took Russian, and a guy came into one of our classes one time. His name was Sergei Shkirkin. He was from, his grandfather immigrated to America after the first revolution in 1917. And he was trying to start some classes. He was doing a grant so that he could getting money from the government so he could teach Russian immigrants English. And he came to us. This was all happening in Sacramento. Davis is not very far from Sacramento. And there was I didn't even know about this at the time, but there was a large Russian immigrant community there in Sacramento. If you go to a public park in West Sacramento, you'd see the rules of the park written in English and in Spanish and in Russian. Anyways, he came to the class and said, hey, if you want to learn Russian, I got a great opportunity for you. You guys can teach Russian-speaking immigrants English, and that'll help you with your Russian, and that'll help them with their English. And so I volunteered for it. After a while, I think I got paid, but at the beginning, it was just volunteer. These people who I was teaching English to, they were the fruit of a missions movement that started in 1867. Along the Volga, there were a lot of Germans who were invited by Ekaterina the great or whatever. And some of those were Protestants, but really in 1867 it's kind of like the dawn of modern day Baptist missions in Russia, and so people I will never meet this side of heaven, over 150, 60 years ago. They sent missionaries. Missionaries came, they established churches, and they were successful. They saw lots of churches established. Then the revolution happens, and of course none of the missionaries could stay after that. They were either, they were either killed or they left. And but these folks stayed as faithful as they knew how to stay. Doctrine's a little bit different than ours. They believe you can lose your salvation and so on and so forth. But they stayed as faithful as they knew how to stay. And anyways, the great grandkids of that movement, when the wall came down and the Soviet Union ceased to exist, Ronald Reagan made a promise to Christians in Russia, saying that if you ever are able to, we'll give you, political sanctuary or whatever in America. And so a lot of people took him up on it. There's probably, it might be half of all of Baptists and charismatics who were in Russia might have moved to America. It was a good portion of them. So anyways, so I was teaching these guys English, and that's really how I got to learn Russian. You can have a degree in a language from the University of California system, and it might not mean a whole lot. I mean, it probably means that you've translated a lot of stuff, and you've obviously done a lot of work and stuff. But your ability to speak the language, just that really helped me more than anything, to tell you the honest truth. And anyways, they invited me to their church. Their church was on, I think it was Solano Street in West Sacramento, and it was a church probably, built in the 40s or something like that, and it was shaped like an L, the sanctuary. So it went like this, and then took a, right turn if you're, left turn if you're looking from the pulpit. They had a great big mirror in the corner so that people in the back could see what was going on, because you couldn't, because I heard the gospel, didn't get saved right away, but because of that, I started going to church that's about 4 blocks from my house in Myrtle Park. I passed it millions of times because it was on my way to school, it was on my way to the store, it was on my way to almost everything. But I never went in. I might have voted there once, but because it was a local voting station. But anyways, so I go in there, and Independent Baptists are great at explaining the gospel. We put a big emphasis on soul winning. And there was a guy in the Russian Baptist thing who tried to explain the gospel to me, or try to see where I was at. And he said, Jesus, he's coming again. Are you ready? And I said, yeah, sure. And he just dropped it, and that was it. Not much of an explanation about sin, not much of an explanation about, I appreciate his effort, but we need to go in a little bit more in depth in the explanation and explain sin, explain our need, and so on and so forth. And in the Independent Baptist Church, they had an invitation. They invited people. They said, if you don't know for sure that if you're going to die, and if you die today that you go to heaven, you should come forward and we'll explain the gospel to you. And I didn't go forward. But after the service, the college and career guy, Dwayne Graves, he walked up to me. And he's like, hey, do you know for sure that if you die today, you go to heaven? And so they just didn't leave it at the invitation. They, looked at, newcomers and so on and so forth that were in the church. And I said, oh, well, I hope so. And he said, well, let me tell you how you can know so. And I went back into an office there with Dwayne, and he explained how I could know so. And it was nothing that I hadn't already learned. I read a book. There's actually a Korean Christian organization on the campus there, and they also played a role. It's just a lot of little touches from a lot of different places. When I was at Davis, I was good friends with a guy named Tony Byun, and he's Korean, and he wanted to go to this Korean Christian association group that met at Davis because he wanted to look at the girls. So I went with him because he didn't want to go by himself. So I went with him, and they were trying to reach him with the gospel, and they gave him a book. It's called Basic Christianity by John W. Stott, who was a fairly good theologian most of his life. At the end, he sort of kind of got wobbly on some of the important doctrines in the Bible, but the book that he wrote was good. It was from a skeptic's point of view. Tony never picked it up. It was on the coffee table in our apartment, and I read it cover to cover. And I remember actually sitting out, outside reading it and thinking to myself. I looked up at the sun and I thought, because basically it had from the skeptic's point of view, it looked at two things. It looked at the testimony of the Apostle Paul and the proof of the resurrection. And if basically you believe those things, then there's a whole lot of evidence for a skeptic to place your faith in the Bible and accept it as the Word of God. And so, anyways, long story short, I believed from that point that the Bible was true. I had not trusted Christ myself, though. I just believed that the Bible was true. So, then started going kind of half to the Russian Baptist church, half to the church that was in my hometown. And after a couple months, I realized that, they kept talking about, if you've trusted Christ, you need to be baptized. And I had been baptized in the Methodist church about 8 days after I was, but that's not the correct order, not the correct mode. Everything was wrong about it. So anyways, I decided to get baptized. Wasn't saved yet. The guy who dealt with me, he said, "Hey man, are you saved? Are you 100% sure?" I lied straight to his face and said, yeah. And then I got really convicted when I was changing into baptistry. And I got really convicted, and I thought, you know what, you fake. You're trying to convince people you're a Christian and you're not. You have not trusted him yourself. There's a faith there, but you haven't prayed to accept him yet. And so anyways, so right before I got baptized, I prayed to accept Christ in the dressing room, just before. And so anyways, so that's how I got saved. I would never have walked in that church, however, if it wasn't for meeting these folks who had been reached, by a missions movement that started many, many, many years ago. When we give to missions, we see people saved at this time. But we never know the end of it. We never know the end of it. I will never know how much of a difference my life has made during my life. It's impossible to know. Because the people you reach, that's never the end of it. Because they reach others too. And then those people reach others. And then those people reach others. So anyways, that's how I got saved.
That's an amazing testimony. So the Lord was clearly preparing you for Russia by having you learn Russian, and then he introduces you to these Russian Baptists. That's an incredible. So, I feel like a lot of high school, going into college students, they, worry about what maybe the Lord's path is for their life. Mm-hmm. But you can just see so clearly in your life, the Lord was obviously preparing you for what he had for you. What would you tell, high school, college, young people who are maybe a little confused about what the Lord has for them?
I think being confused about what the Lord has for you is great. And I'm going to tell you why. Because, I got a testimony that is like, smacks me over the head, and, it's just so obvious, right after I got saved and I graduated from college, then my pastor said, I think you should go to your Bible college. And so I did. And then while I was in Bible college, Dr. Don Sisk was preaching at a missions conference. Never been to missions conference before. My church didn't really have them. I'd been saved all of a year before I went to Bible college. So everything about Christianity was new to me. I didn't know what devotions were. I remember when I was late to the I didn't make it to the orientation. Because I had kind of promised the place I was working that I would finish up to this date. And so anyways, so I got there for classes on time and stuff, but I missed orientation. I missed a lot of some of the fun stuff you do at the very beginning. But anyways, I remember the dorm soup. He's like, okay, so we're going to do devotions now, so everyone's going to do devotions. And I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, I can probably guess what devotions are, but I don't want to, assume that I know, because I've never even heard that word before. So, am I supposed to just read my Bible and pray? Is that what we're doing here? And he said, yeah, that's what we're doing here. So anyways, so yeah, I kind of got off the topic there.
No,
what was your question?
No, I think it just, young people.
Oh, right. Why I think this is so great. Okay, because here's the deal. I think that's great. If I was a young person today and I had any inkling that God wanted to use me in some kind of special way. See, here's the thing. It's 2025, and we've got lots of places where we don't have any missionaries. And that's not how it's supposed to be. The Great Commission, given in every gospel and in the book of Acts, go ye therefore and teach all nations, does not have a qualifier on it about nations that might be kind of difficult. I might be in a slightly difficult place, but when the Great Commission was given, it was given in the middle of the Roman Empire. No place was easy. Every place was hard. Every place was going to cost you quite a bit to go there. So if a young person's like, he thinks maybe that the Lord wants to use them like that, I would look at a map and see, in many places where, America has very little contact with. And most people, what they do is they do what I do. They go, and they're like, well, it looks like God's prepared you. But if we all do that, then we're all going to go to Mexico, someplace in Asia, maybe someplace in Europe, and we're going to skip like a whole gigantic part of the world. Some of us have to go someplace where there isn't anybody already, and that necessarily means that our life might not have prepared us as much as maybe somebody else to go there. How many people do you know who speak Uzbek? I don't know anybody. And yet, there's a place called Uzbekistan that I don't know of anybody there. It's heavily Muslim, but you can go there. You can get a visa kind of easily in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, all the Middle Asian countries there. Turkmenistan is one of the hardest places to get into in the world for an American. It's harder than North Korea, but we need to send missionaries there too. So there's if someone's like, I don't know what God wants me to do, check out a map. Maybe God hasn't prepared you for a specific place because he needs you to go someplace where there's nobody there right now. And a lot of us, if we're going to reach this world, if we're going to put churches all over the place, then there's going to be some of us who are going to go to places where God hasn't especially prepared us directly for that place, other than just touching our hearts and wanting us to be obedient to the Great Commission. And I think that's super important. There's missionaries who are just going to Nepal. There's missionaries who are just starting to open up. I know of one missionary in Kyrgyzstan. There's a ton of places where we just and we think to ourselves, well, I speak Spanish or I speak Korean or Chinese or something like that. And those are great. Maybe God is calling you there. I don't know, but you might want to consider a lot of places where there just isn't anybody. Sure. I don't know of all people in Myanmar. I know people on the border of they're in India and they're just right on the border of Myanmar, but I don't know of anybody there right now. And there's a ton of Muslim countries in in Africa that are very, I don't know of anybody there too. So I think the Bible says during the Great Tribulation, there's going to be people saved from all over the place. And I think part of what we need to do is we need to get to all over the place so that we can sow the seed there, and then God will use it in the Great Tribulation. So we need to get out to more of these places. So that's what I would say to someone who's a little bit, not seeing something like they saw, like I saw in my life. Well, that might mean that you just need to look at a map and just go someplace where there's nobody. I think whenever someone says, I'm not sure about the will of God in my life, I say, hey, man, there are so many places where there's no one there, and we know it's God's will corporately for Christianity to be everywhere. So maybe he hasn't called you to, prepared you for a specific place because the places you can go to can't be prepared for because there's nobody here that we don't have any contact with that country hardly.
Sure.
So anyways.
No, that's a great point. And so, were your parents, were they Christians or?
My mom, I think so. My dad, I'm not so sure. He said some things when I got saved. I tried to witness to him and made it seem like, well, I'll never believe that. He said something like, basically, I'll never believe, some dude because I was talking to him about. Some of the things that David did and so on and so forth, but still going to heaven. Some of the things Lot did, still going to heaven, and so on and so forth. But he was very much thinking that, you can't tell me that guy over there is going to heaven. And, so he really wanted to work for it. Now he tells me that, he's trusted Christ as his Savior, trusting just in faith and so on and so forth. But he kind of knows what I witnessed to him again. I witnessed to him lots of times. Just about every time I come back, some of the first things I do. But this time I took him out to eat. I got him, long story short, I witnessed to him again, and he's just said, well, when I was, 12, I went through the confirmation in the Presbyterian Church. And so as far as I understand what that is, it's basically just going through some basic doctrines of the Bible from their point of view. And so on and so forth. But lots of people do that and aren't saved, but he says that he did get saved at that time. So he knows how to be saved. I've told him many times.
Sure.
It's up to him, and I pray that he has made a decision. But I do think out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh, and I told him this. I said, but lots of things you've said in the past have made me think that, no. So anyways.
Were they encouraging of you going to Bible college or?
Not at the beginning.
Okay.
My dad said something to the effect of, he thought I was kind of scared of life, that I was, just trying to go back to school just so that I don't have to get a real job or something. Although he wanted me to go to law school, I took which would have been going back to school. I took the LSTAT, did fine on it, could have gone to, wherever. But yeah, he wasn't. But then after about me being there a year, they made peace with it. And then when they heard that I was probably going to go to Russia, that was also kind of hard for them to hear. If you have a spiritual point of view on it, then you want for your kids, you want God's will, whatever that is. If you know your kids are saved and they're going to heaven, then you want, if it's Russia, if it's Turkmenistan, if it's North Korea, you want your kids to love God and follow Him. But if you're not saved, or if you're not really right with God in that area, then that, of course, you just worry about them a ton. And I think it's interesting, if you look at in Matthew where Peter, they're there at Caesarea Philippi, and they're there around a bunch of idols, and temples to false gods and stuff. And I've actually stood there right next to where they were. I've been in Israel. And anyways, Peter tells Jesus that he doesn't want him to go to the cross. Sure. Peter says, and when Peter says that, what is Peter thinking? Peter's thinking, I love you, Jesus. I don't want to see you hurt. I don't want to see you get, I don't want to see bad things happen to you. I want you to, he's thinking of earthly things, but there's something that probably a lot of us have had these thoughts about our kids, sure. Not wanting them to get hurt, not wanting them to be put in danger, not wanting them to have a hard life, and so on and so forth. But Jesus tells them, get thee behind me, Satan, as one of his strongest rebukes ever. And Peter's heart might have been kind of, in a place where but he was caring more about Jesus's earthly, he was caring more about what happens to Jesus in this life than he was caring about what Jesus was going to do and what God's plan was for Jesus. So parents, play a big role in this. So I think what we need to do is we need to say to our kids, hey, I want God's will for you, wherever that is. And if it's, and we'll support you and we'll love you. And, and very honestly, right now, my folks are super supportive, whereas at the very beginning, not so much. But now, since I've been there a long time, and I would even say my dad's probably proud of me, because, he's proud I'm able to get around all the things that have thwarted a lot of other people from staying there and stuff. We get our support through crypto, and it's not very complicated or anything. And somebody else told me about it. It wasn't like I thought of it myself, but anyways, he's probably kind of proud of me that he goes to church way more. We never went to church when I was growing up, but he goes all the time now. He goes to Methodist church, he goes to one of the Methodist churches that actually broke off from the mainline denomination because they were going heavy LGBTQ and all that stuff.
Sure.
Anyways.
Yeah. So you go to West Coast.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
And then tell us about going to West Coast and meeting your wife. And
okay, cool. So West Coast. If I had to do it all over again, I'd definitely go to West Coast Baptist College. Great place. I knew nothing about how to be a Christian. I had been a Christian a year, and I was reading my Bible, and I was trying to tell people about Christ a little bit, but I had really, I'd never been, gone on church soul winning or something like that, and we had that. I never went. But I learned how to, I saw my first person saved ever. His name was Jonathan. He was 9. He was in the teen class, bus teen class. He was there with his older brother, didn't want to be separated from him. Raised his hand at the invitation, and I told him how to go to heaven. First person I ever led to Christ. I learned what the Bible said about a million things. Like I talked about with the Russian Baptist Union, I had some questions about eternal security because, they didn't believe in it, and the other churches that I was going to did believe in it. And so it was nice that, one of my first classes was Hebrews, so we went through the book of Hebrews, which, has a few verses in there, like in chapter 6 and verse 10, and so after those things were explained to me, and so on and so forth, I understood it a lot better. And so anyways, I met my wife. My wife, she was not even in college. She was a teacher. She's a first grade teacher. She actually graduated. She was the first graduate of West Coast Baptist College. And she had been teaching there for, I think, a year when I got there. We were actually in the same high school graduating class. She's born in Tennessee, but moved to California. I was born in North Carolina, but moved to California. Both of our sets of grandparents are from the Midwest. Hers are from Wichita, mine are from Tulsa. So we have a lot in common, actually, to a lot of stuff. To look at us, we're not very common. I mean, she's short, I'm tall, lots of differences there. But yeah, I remember the first time I saw her, she was walking, she was singing in the choir, and they would walk in, and so forth. And her and her sister were the two people who walk in first. And that's the first time I noticed her. My first year there, I wasn't sure. I mean, I got called to preach, but I wasn't. When you get called, oftentimes you don't know, how. You might not be super sure in that calling yet. And I was fairly sure, but I didn't want to, announce to anybody. So I just kind of went to Bible college for that first year. And then after I had gone there and since I didn't know, I wasn't positive what the Lord wanted me to do. And I just wanted to just wait on it a bit. I didn't date anybody. I thought if I was going to date somebody, well, I need to be the leader and in that relationship. And if I don't know what I'm doing, where am I? That's the first thing in leadership is you got to know where you're going. You can't lead anybody to where you don't know where you're going. So anyways, and I didn't want to marry somebody who was called to serve the Lord full time if I wasn't. Anyways, I waited off, and then about a year, right when the year ended, I told the college I was going to come back. I told your uncle, Dr. R. Then basically I asked my wife, Angela, if I could start writing her. So I was going to go back home, get a job, work. I think I worked in security mostly, and so I started writing her. And then after that, I remember we were going to go on a missions trip to Russia to visit a missionary there, and she went with me. A couple other people did, and anyways, I remember Pastor Chappell kind of nudging me and saying, "Brother, I've been dating her for about a year up to that point," and she said, "Brother, if you have my blessing if you want to ask her to marry you." And I was glad he gave me that nudge, because very honestly, sometimes we're so surrendered that we're a little bit, we don't want to, how do I want to say this? We want to be so open to God's will that we never kind of clamp onto something. But that really helped me. It's like, okay, yeah, you're right. It's about time. So I proposed marriage to my wife actually in St. Petersburg, in a very romantic place right next to the Winter Palace, which is called the Hermitage now, right on the Palace Bridge. It was taped. The missionaries we were with taped it, and they watched it in the girls' dorm.
There you go.
She was a dorm mom, and I was also a dorm mom at the time, but for guys. And so, anyways, I wasn't there in the girls' dorm. I don't know, but I heard about it later that everybody watched it. So, anyways.
No, that's great. So, you feel called to Russia. You get engaged. You eventually get to Russia. Mm-hmm. Tell us about starting kind of in Russia.
Well, I spoke Russian. While I was in Bible college, I led a guy to Christ in Russian here in Los Angeles area. They were planting Los Angeles Baptist Church, and there were some Armenian folks here, and some of those guys, they spoke Armenian, but they also spoke Russian. And so I led a guy named Varashak to the Lord. My friend William Miracle and we went in there, and I witnessed to him, and he got saved. So I had already the ability to, I was preaching for I went there to the mission field, and I went and worked in another guy's church, also a missionary, for a couple years. That was a good idea. That was a smart idea. Even though I was probably more prepared than most, it still helped me understand a lot of the pitfalls that you can get into, which was very educational and a great thing to find out about. But anyways, after that, I always knew that the Lord had uniquely prepared me to, maybe be kind of the vanguard. In other words, the first guy into a new area. Sometimes missionaries, they kind of bunch up in places. I can never tell somebody that, they're out of the Lord's will, but, even sometimes with missions, we can kind of concentrate on maybe 20 countries and have 90% of the missionaries be going there. Anyways, long story short, I went to 3 different areas in Russia where I didn't know of any Southern Baptist or Independent Baptist or any kind of Baptist besides maybe Baptist Union. I went to Volgograd, I went to Ekaterinburg, and I went to Samara. And just about every place I went to, my first reaction was, oh yeah, I want to be here, because there's always a need everywhere and so on and so forth. But Samara had the largest amount of freedom. Samara's kind of an interesting little town. It's got 1.3 million people in it. Togliatti, which is a town right next to it, named after an Italian communist, served by the same airport. It has 900,000 people there. So it's actually about the 3rd largest population center in Russia, but almost no one's heard about it. But it's very, like Kazan is super Muslim. Ekaterinburg is probably, if they renewed the Russian monarchy, it would probably come out of there, because that's very popular there. And Volgograd was communist. The governor of Volgograd, the guy who ran the city, he's a communist. So there's all kinds of different areas, but Samara was kind of middle of the road on everything. So it wasn't like one person or one movement had like all the power. And I thought that's probably the best place for me to go because I'll probably have the most freedom. And I think I was right about that. Yeah, that's kind of how I went. Once I knew the place, then I tried to go to the place where I thought I went to a major city. Paul always went to the major cities. He went to some smaller places too. He does write the epistle to the churches in Galatia, which we can assume are maybe not as big, but most of the letters, he's Thessalonica, Corinth, these are big major places. And then in the book of Acts, he goes to Athens and so on and so forth, Rome. So he went to the population centers. Anyways, that's where I figured that I should go. And then there was lots of things I found out about Samara. I only had about 3 days in each place to go because I didn't want to re-register, and that's a big process and it's complicated. And and then I have to register when I go back. Every time you go anywhere as a foreigner in Russia, you have to tell the government where you are, and it can be kind of a long line and a hassle and so on and so forth. And you attract attention that way. So, anyways. But you can stay in a hotel for a couple days without having to re-register. So that's what I did. Anyways.
Okay. So you go to Samara.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any, is it just you and your wife at this point? Or?
My wife and 2 kids.
Okay.
So we had, I remember our first time we were there, we found an apartment, and we moved in the summertime, because that's way easier to move in the summertime in Russia than it is in the wintertime. By September, we already bought an apartment in a village outside of Samara because it was all we could afford. It was 732 square feet, and it needed to be remodeled. It was kind of old and dilapidated a little bit. It was from the 1980s, which means it was actually kind of nicer than most apartments there, but it was still in need of some help. The apartment that first apartment that we had, the lady was not paying any of the bills, and it was in our agreement for her to pay the bills, and she wasn't paying any of them. And so we got legal notices about that the apartment was going to be seized soon because she hadn't paid anything on it. And so we thought, this is bad, and this is where we live. Sure. So we had bought a new place, but it was just new to us. It wasn't new, and we needed to fix it up some. So we rented the cheapest place I could find, and basically it had no refrigerator. It had a stove. The heat wasn't that great. It didn't have any furniture. We just had a mattress that we threw on the floor. And I remember that's how we spent Christmas that year. We didn't have anything. It was the windows, the walls in Russia are really thick, and so the window sills are very thick. And I remember we didn't have a refrigerator, so we put milk and other things. I noticed the windows were fairly cold, and so we put the stuff over there, hoping that it would be cold enough to refrigerate the stuff. Our milk froze on the windowsill. It was that cold in our apartment. And so I remember my little daughter, Amelia, she would peel off. I mean, the sides of the walls were falling off, which happens a lot of times in big, tall brick buildings because they sit. In other words, all of the space between the bricks kind of crunch down a little bit, and so a lot of times plaster falls off the wall. And she thought it was the greatest thing to put plaster in her mouth over and over and over again. And we're like, oh, she's a smart one. But anyways, but then I got the thing remodeled. We moved. We lived there for about 4 months, and while I was remodeling the other place, and we made it up. We fixed it up pretty nice. It wasn't big, but it was something we owned, and it wouldn't depend on. We actually used that apartment to get our residency. And one of the key things for a lot of these countries is being just allowed to stay there by the government. And so we were able to do that because we bought an apartment right off the bat, and we went through this. It was about a 2 to 2.5 year process of getting permanent residency, which sounds permanent, but it lasts for 5 years. But anyways, so we got that in 2008. Which really helped us to stay in the country, because without that, if we just had visas, we just wouldn't get them the next time if there was a war, this, that, or the other. And so we were glad we made that commitment to look to the future. And it was more expensive, and we didn't live as well as we could have lived otherwise if we just rented something or whatever. But it made a ton of difference in us staying. And every place is different. Some of the places it'll be better to rent because it'll be just prohibitively expensive to be able to buy anything in some of the major cities in the world.
Sure.
But for us, that was, I think, what the Lord wanted. And so, yeah.
Absolutely. So, talk me through your beginning of your church there. So take us through the church. Then kind of.
So how do you start a church? Okay. Well. You go soul winning, and at that time we could do it, and outside in the open and so on and so forth. A lot of these laws that prohibit evangelism happened in 2014. So what we did basically was I would meet people out soul winning, did a lot of survey evangelism, did a lot of different things. Also at this time, started a football team. I saw a guy saved. That guy, I tried to disciple him. He came a couple times, didn't really work out. One of the things we talked about, he was a big NBA fan, and so we would talk about the Lakers and other stuff. Anyways, he called me up about a year after that and said, hey, there's some guys who want to start a football team. He knew that I played in college, and so anyways, and we're talking about American football, not soccer. So I went over there to meet these guys, and it really became kind of a way for me to meet about 1 million people, and we saw quite a few people saved from it, and we actually I ended up coaching that team for about 13 years or something like that. We won championships. I was voted Coach of the Year in Russia a couple times, and so on and so forth. So that was cool. But that was something actually. One of the times when I was needed to renew a residency, there was a mistake made, and anyways, long story short, I was declared a person of special ability. Basically, it's when you have, it's like a H-1B visa here in America, where you have somebody who you want to keep in the country because of their expertise, but my expertise was teaching people how to tackle. So anyways, it didn't have very many requirements on it, so just about anybody could do it. But what happened is that one of the guys on the football team, one of his mom's best friends, was like the third person in rank in the migration office, and her name was Anatolia Nikolaevna, I think, and he went to, and I said, I'm having trouble getting my residency renewed, and this looks bad. And so anyways, one of the guys on the team, Vlad, he went and talked to her and brought me with him, and he said, okay, this is what you need to do. This is how we'll fix this. And because of the football team, I got to stay in Russia. Other ways would just be survey evangelism. In other words, I would go through a little survey with people just on the street. If you have a clipboard, you kind of look official. And so and people oftentimes want to give their opinions about things. Sure. So that was a way I could because it's tough. In Russia, you don't just say howdy to people, as you're walking by or whatever, especially in a big city. But even in villages and stuff, it can be kind of tough. In villages, what happens is nobody wants to get too close to you because everybody knows everything that happens in a village. And so people don't want to even come to your house. Nobody ever came to my house except for our very next door neighbors. And they came to our house basically because there was a door that kind of led into our two doors into our apartments. So no one ever knew they came into our house. No one ever knew. And they were okay with that. So, but everybody else, nobody ever come. But in big city, you have a lot more anonymity. So people come over to your house in the city. I had lots of people come from Samara to visit us. And so we witnessed lots of people as I invited them to dinner or something like that after meeting them on the street and making friends with them or something and like that. So another way we reach people is through our English club. This is actually started by a single lady missionary. Her name is Sarah Sager, who worked with us for quite a few years. She's in Romania now. But she actually got caught outside of Russia during COVID, taking care of her mom who passed away. We've reached a lot of people through that as well. So it's just at the very beginning, we reach people, they get saved, and then what happens? Well, we bought a piece of land and we were building a building on that so we could build a church and so on and so forth. I had inquired about renting places for church, and it was like just about impossible because anytime you mention the word church, everyone's thinking, oh, well, this is trouble. I'd much rather rent to someone who's not going to bring any, politics / religion / whatever, and maybe be a problem. So we had to own whatever we were going to do. So we needed to build a building. But while we were building the building, what I did was I just met in the people who got saved. I said, okay, if they were a lady, I would meet with them in a cafe, so it was a public place. If it was a guy, I could meet with the guy in his apartment or whatever. So my Sundays looked like having a little service just with my family in our apartment. And then going from house to house to house to house to house, and finishing up usually about 8 o'clock at night or so, going to all these places and just individual discipling of all these folks. And then when they would graduate from discipling, then I would do different things with them with the church. And then I had a friend of mine from the football team who started a time cafe. It's like a cafe where you go in and you don't pay for what you eat, but you pay for the time you spend there. And the drink, you got tea and coffee and little treats or whatever are free. You have board games and video games and stuff. To find like locations like that socially for people to mingle and stuff, everybody lives in small apartments there. Almost nobody invites other people to their apartment because there's almost no room in them to even have people over. So it's like coffee house culture in Vienna or something like that. It's like everybody's living room is not in their living room. It's someplace else. And so that became people's living rooms. And he was a good friend of mine from the football team. His name was Yura. And I asked him if we could start meeting there as a church. We met in his basement so that we could sing because there was enough insulation between he had the first floor and he had the basement. And so we would meet in the basement, sing in the basement, have church in the basement, and so on and so forth. And so we met with our little group of believers there, and we met there for years. And then finally we got our building built, and so on and so forth. And then so that we could do everything, in a much bigger, nicer space. Sure. And we have, better Sunday school facilities and stuff, and all that kind of thing. And so we started meeting out there. But it goes slow at the beginning, and it takes a lot of work and effort. But it can be done. I think that the Lord can start an independent Baptist church anywhere in the world, including North Korea, including Turkmenistan, including Iran. I think Iran is going to open up a little bit very soon. They are having great difficulties in Tehran. I don't know if you know this, but basically, since the revolution, there have been two big grafts in the Iranian government. They've been spending all the people's money on their nuclear program for a country that has a ton of oil. which doesn't really need nuclear power plants. But anyways, and then they've been spending all the rest of the money on dams so they become water independent. And they built 500 dams since 1979. 500. We have 15 on the Colorado River, and they don't have anything like the Colorado River in Iran. And yet, so anyways, long story short, they're moving the capital from Tehran because in that city of like 28 million people, they just don't have any water. They don't have any water to do anything. They don't have hardly enough water to drink. And they're moving it to a city that's next to the ocean so they can hopefully start desalinization, I think. I think that's their plan. But anyways, that place could fall tomorrow. Sure. And I think it would be awesome for some guys to look at what the Lord is doing in the world and say, well, maybe God wants me to go to Iran. And that place could just, I know of one missionary right now who lives in Armenia who's been running a radio station and I think a church out of Armenia trying to reach the north of Iran with his radio station and so on and so forth. And I think that's awesome. We got to be creative. There's all kinds of different ways to reach people in this world. Sometimes it's on a bus. Sometimes it's out door to door. Sometimes it's out doing a lot of things that we were all trained to do, and so on and so forth. And then sometimes you got to be even more creative than that because those avenues are not open to you. But it doesn't mean that we're off the hook and that we don't need to go there because you can't do it like you learn in Bible college. We're still on the hook. There's still people there. They still need to hear the gospel. So we just got to come up with more creative ways to reach a lot of people. All those actions that I talked about, English clubs and sports and all that stuff, that's not illegal there. So I can meet a ton of people that way. Then I can witness to them. And once you've done that, once you've been their best friend, once you've been their coach, once you've been their teacher, a lot of Russians don't even know about those laws. There are new Russian laws every week. Sure. So a lot of people don't even know about them. But even the ones who do, after you've tried to be that kind to them and help them in their lives and stuff, they're not going to go to the police and say, hey, this guy told me about Christ. So anyways, there are cracks in any place, and there's places where God can start a church. And so we have to be ready to go do that.
No, that's wonderful. I think we just kind of want to transition now even to modern day, maybe a little bit about the conflict there and how that's maybe changed things for you.
Yeah, okay.
Please.
Okay, so since 2014, we've had a bunch of laws against everything that a church does, is supposed to do. Now, the Orthodox Church there, they don't ever invite anybody to come to their church. Honestly, most Russian Baptist churches only invite like friends. They don't have a whole lot of outward evangelism and so on and so forth. But at least not with the emphasis like independent Baptists do. So those laws were tough because we had to stop doing a lot of stuff. I handed out probably 1.5 million tracts before 2014, covered the city, but couldn't do that anymore. So needed to do other things. But I want to start all of this by saying this: with the war and with all the laws and with all the maybe antagonism of some people to Americans, although not very many, honestly. Our church has seen more people saved, more people coming to church than we've ever seen before at this time right now. So God is able. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 8, God is able. But we just got to be willing to do whatever he wants us to do there. So anyways, the way it is now, our city is droned every day, multiple drones. Oftentimes, they don't let you, it's become illegal to photograph or show any of the repercussions of the droning, any of the explosions and stuff. I used to know all about them, exactly what they hit and so on and so forth, but that's all become illegal. But they do sometimes say how many they shot down. That's apparently not illegal. So most of the time, Samara Oblast, our area, we shoot down the most drones because we had the most drones sent our way. It's very interesting because most of all the cities that are right next to the region, they're not droning there as much as the cities. I think they're droning more away just the military and stuff. But with our city is just we're kind of a hub for a bunch of oil, and they're trying to collapse the production of Russian oil because that's where they get all their money from. And which very honestly, if the war stopped tomorrow, I very much think that still the Russian economy is not going to bounce back from this, because they've hurt the oil industry enough, and no one's going to buy Russian oil. They've all got different sources for it now, and Europe just pivoted away from the cheap Russian oil, and they're not going to ever. It's going to be 15 years before they'll trust Russia again to give them money for their oil, because they'll be worried about what they're going to do with that money.
Sure.
So anyways, plus the Russian oil system doesn't have any storage. In America, we have reserves, like in Cushing, Oklahoma, we have a ton. We have less. Well, anyways, in Houston, we have a ton. We have a way to continue to pump the oil, and you have to have that in your oil system, because the way oil wells work is they have to keep constantly flowing. If you stop them from flowing, you might not get them to start again. It's like when you're siphoning gas out of your tank. If you get down to a certain level, and it just becomes very hard to get that last one if you don't keep it going.
Sure.
So anyways, this is stopping the flow. And see, the flow stops in the pipes. Russian winter comes, the oil expands in the pipes. Most of the time it's flowing, and if it's flowing, then it's not under the physics of the thing, it won't expand. But if it stops and expands, then all the pipes burst. And if all the pipes burst, then we don't have, we won't be able to produce oil. And if Russia can't produce oil, then Russia loses all of its money.
Okay.
And I really think this is probably going to happen. And when that happens, like I said before, the greatest time of revival in the history of the world hasn't happened yet. It's going to happen during the Great Tribulation.
Sure.
It's going to happen during the hardest time the world has ever seen. And so God sends those times in His mercy so that people will look up to heaven and ask questions, and be on their knees when they do it.
Sure.
And that kind of thing, I think, is going to happen with Russia. Now, just like the Great Tribulation, some people can curse God while the rocks fall upon them, and just turn from God anyways. But a lot of people, I think, can get saved during these times, because they don't look to their own sufficiency or the sufficiency of their government or any of other religious system. And so I have been praying for 23 years plus for revival, and I don't want to not be there when it happens. So now there's lots of people who have left Russia, and they've gone on to do different things. And there's lots of open mission fields, like in Poland and in Romania and so on and so forth. A lot of the Ukrainian diaspora that speaks Russian. Some speak Ukrainian as well, but lots of them speak Russian. You can go there and reach those people, and that's great. You can see a lot of people saved, especially when they get out of their normal environs and out of the influence of family and friends, because a lot of people just make the decision about whether they're going to accept Christ by what they think people will think of them if they do. But some people have to stay also, because there's going to be life after this war. And I think the end is coming faster than a lot of people think. I just think economically, Russia's selling gold right now. They're selling gold out of their reserve. When was the last time you ever heard of a country selling gold for other purposes other than, they think gold is a bad investment or something? That you do that when you don't have anything else to sell. Sure. And they don't have any more foreign currency. They've run through all that. And they had half of it confiscated by European banks at the behest of America, so they don't have Their economy is about to the Russian railway system, which is one of the bellwethers of the whole place. It's not shipping anything anymore, and that's a huge indicator that they're in trouble. They've never not made a profit in their all years of during the Soviet times of existence, and right now they're running in the red. Anyways, lots of indicators that we definitely want to be there for the next few years because of where I think things are going to happen. And of course, this country still has nuclear weapons. I don't think the nuclear weapons probably are as great a threat as they say. In other words, I think they say they have about 6,000 of them or something. I'd be surprised to find out 30 work. But if 30 work, that's still a great big problem. Because if they can deliver a payload and so on and so forth, and we can't stop it, I think a lot of it we can stop. But you just it's still playing with fire. So you want to be careful about that. But more than that, God cares about these folks. He told us to preach the gospel to every creature, and so we can't be fulfilling the Great Commission and not be going to the places, even if that place thinks that they are our enemy. We still have to go. There are no qualifiers on the Great Commission. We have to go to every country, and that includes those who don't like us very much. Now, having said that, Russians like us a lot, actually. We might think that they don't like us because of what the government says, and the government says a lot of things, and yet, like 80% of all the government officials, when they send their kids to college, you know where they send their kids to college to? They go to America. They go to England. They go to the Sorbonne in France. They go to Oxford and Cambridge, and so if they really thought that we were so terrible, you wouldn't send your kids there to get educated. But a lot of what they say is to create a paper tiger so that they can, justify all the repressive rules that they do. Because I think Putin likes war because it gives him an excuse to be overbearing power-wise and stuff. So.
Yes, sir. No, I think that's wonderful, and just looking forward to the future there and everything the Lord is doing. And so do you have any kind of just last things to say about the future of your ministry there, and just any last charge to any young people about the future of God's will for them?
Well, I don't want to be any other place besides God's will, and I'm going to heaven. My pastor asked me a question right when I told him I thought that first year I come back to my home church, first year of Bible college, and I come back and I say, Pastor, I think God wants me to be a missionary to Russia. And he said, well, Adam, that means that's possible that you might give your life for this. And what he meant was, I was going to die. And I said, I remembered a quote from John R. Rice. And John R. Rice once said, you can't threaten me with heaven.
Yeah.
Death for the Christian, it's not something that, I don't think it's something that we need to try. I'm not looking to become a martyr or something like that. I don't think that's Christian. But I'm also not trying to run from, the possibility of, some hardship or something because there's, So if I was a young person today, I would trust God, and I would follow His leading wherever it takes me. It is a great, I don't know if shame is the right word, but it's very important. It's not what we're supposed to be doing corporately. I can never walk up to a person and say, hey man, how come you're not in Uzbekistan, or whatever, because I don't know that God wants that guy particularly to go to Uzbekistan. But At the same time, corporately as Christians, we're missing a lot of the world. And we're coming up with things like, well, that place is closed. But the Bible says God is able.
Yeah.
If you look at when even the Bible talks about an open door, the very next half of that verse, and there are many adversaries.
Yeah.
It's not like open door doesn't mean everyone's going to love you when you get there and smile and give you a hug and kiss you on both cheeks and welcome you when you show up.
Sure.
It means that I think the definition of an open door is there's lots of people there and there's no one preaching the gospel. That's what an open door is. An open door isn't everything's easy. Even in the Philippines, where or in different ministries where you think there's a whole lot of people getting saved, it's not easy. There's all kinds of difficulties.
Sure.
But it's just so I would trust God and follow His leading and look at what He told us to do and look at what we're doing and see where I can be a part of us corporately obeying what God said about reaching the world. That's what I would do if I was a young person today.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your testimony, and thank you for being faithful in Russia and our hope and prayer.
Thank you for your support. I couldn't be there without churches like yours, without you being faithful to what God has called you to do, reaching this part of the world, helping your church to grow, giving missionaries like me a financial base from which I can go to the world. I could not be doing what I'm doing without you. So thank you for what you do.
Oh, yes, sir. Well, we appreciate you, and we're thankful for you, and we're going to continue praying for you and your ministry there, and just thank you for giving your time to kind of share some of your story, and our hope and prayers that some young people will see this, and hopefully they see the needs, even some of the ones that you've mentioned today, and perhaps follow the Lord's leading to go to one of those countries. So,
amen.
Thank you so much.
That would be awesome.
Yes, sir. Perfect.